Hello and welcome to the Geeks Review. I'm Royce.
And I'm Joshua. Today we'll be looking at the new Disney Pixar film Onward, but first a quick look at Better Call Saul.
Better Call Saul is a spin-off to Breaking Bad. For those who don't know what that is, that starred Bryan Cranston, the dad from Malcolm in the Middle, as a underappreciated chemistry teacher, Walter White, who's diagnosed with inoperable lung cancer shortly after his 50th birthday, so he teams up with a former student of his, Jesse Pinkman, played by Aaron Paul, to cook crystal meth. Because that makes sense. That's the logical thing to do.
That's what you do.
That is, of course, what you do. So as Walt drops further and further into evil and darkness, he comes across many colourful characters, one of which being the criminal defence lawyer, Saul Goodman, played by Bob Odenkirk, which is what Better Call Saul is based upon. It's sort of a pre-sequel. You do have the first scene of every season. It's shot in black and white and it takes place after the original show. But the majority of the show takes place before Breaking Bad in the early 2000s, mid-2000s. And it focuses on Saul, now called Jimmy McGill, as a small-time defense lawyer living in the shadow of his older brother Chuck, played by Michael McKean of Laverne and Shirley and Spinal Tap fame. And Chuck, he's a senior partner at this prestigious law firm, but he's now homebound because he's living with various quirks and mental illnesses, one of which is a hypersensitivity to electricity. So he lives in a house with no power, with a space blanket. It's a alfoil blanket over his shoulders to keep him safe. Jimmy's only real friend is Kim Wexler. She's a fellow lawyer like him, played by Ray Seahorn, and she tries to do things by the book, but she also sort of breaks bad and slips into the sometimes criminal enterprises that Jimmy cooks up. It's a very slow-moving show in comparison to Breaking Bad. I mean, Breaking Bad, first episode, you see him beating up some bullies who are picking on his 15-year-old son who has cerebral palsy. And the decline into becoming Saul is much more gradual. Some have even said meandering, and that's why a lot of people haven't really watched this show. But I think because it's on Stan, it's recently wrapped up its 5th season. You've got it all there, you can just binge watch it all. The 6th and final season is supposedly coming next year. I'd really strongly recommend it because not only do you get to hang out with Saul, who was a fan favourite from Breaking Bad, you've also got Mike Ehrmantraut, played by Jonathan Banks, another fan favourite, and Gus Fring, played by Giancarlo Esposito, who you would know, Josh, as Moff Gideon from The Mandalorian.
Yep.
Gus Fring was really like a career-making role for Esposito. It's terrifying, but also somewhat sympathetic as a villain role, and his role is initially secret in Breaking Bad, but I mean, the show's been out for over 10 years now. And
Come on, it's like The Wire. If you haven't seen it now, then you haven't seen it.
I'm actually getting around to watching that, to be honest. So no spoilers on that one.
Great, you're catching up, and I'm starting bloody American Gods. Sorry, finished American Gods.
How was that? Quick review.
Slow,
Oh,
but
really?
interesting. It's a very interesting show. It, focuses a lot on the forgotten and old gods and shows the new gods of the modern day as mere concepts.
All right.
Like, you've got media, media in general, phones, old television. Mr. World is meant to be, globalization and capitalism. You got Techno Boy, which is just, technology.
Oh, yes.
It's interesting. I would say give it a watch. There's only 2 seasons, though, at the moment.
It's on Amazon Prime, is it?
Yeah.
That's a quick review of American Gods, and this is my slightly longer review of Better Call Saul. It's on Stan, much cheaper, I guess, and easier to get than Amazon, or is it about the same?
About the same, really.
Yeah.
I think I'm paying maybe $1 less for Prime than I would be for Stan.
Oh.
But the issue is if you're a VPN user because you're paranoid like I am, you can't watch it on your computer, so you have to switch it off to watch it on the computer. Yeah.
Right.
Apparently Amazon's paranoid as well, but that's just me.
Well, that's something to keep in mind.
Exactly.
But anyway, Better Call Saul, if you like Breaking Bad, definitely give it a watch. Keep in mind that it is slower, but I do prefer it to Breaking Bad, honestly. I just went and rewatched it with some friends. It is shockingly brutal, going back to that show.
Well, Breaking Bad or Saul?
Breaking Bad,
Yeah.
yeah. Saul is much comfier because a lot of the characters you already kind of know their fates because of Breaking Bad. So you can just sit down and enjoy.
So they've got plot armor, but they don't have plot armor.
But they play with that still. One of the first characters you meet in Better Call Saul Season 1, Episode 1 I should say, is a villain from Breaking Bad Season 1, Tuco Salamanca, and he's this psychopathic Mexican cartel member who's always like high on something. Completely explosive.
Of course.
And when he shows up, you're like, oh my god, what's going to happen here? And it still does deal with, there's still quite a bit of peril involved in that, despite the characters having plot armor. I wish I could rewatch it, and I will rewatch it, definitely, but to go in no knowledge would be really fun as well. Like I said, it's on Stan. Give it a watch if that sounds good. Which was released to theatres, but also available to watch now on Disney+.
It was one of the last films released before the COVID lockdown.
Yes.
And because of while it was still playing in theatres during the COVID lockdown, it didn't receive the stellar performance that everyone expected it would have.
Oh, for sure. And this is... Oh, it's a Pixar film, you know.
It's a Pixar film?
Not Cars. Toy Story.
Like classic Pixar.
Yes.
An original IP that hasn't been watered down yet by the House of Mouse.
Yeah, this is the first original film they've really done since Coco, which I haven't seen.
Both of those were still return to form for Pixar.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, they did Finding Dory. They did The Incredibles 2.
That, I think, would probably be one of the better sequels that they have released.
Oh, for sure,
that have been forced, even if it wasn't Brad Bird coming back.
Oh, yes.
But it was helping a great deal. Yeah. You can feel the touch of the bird.
So this is completely original in a way, and it's an urban fantasy. So it was a world that once had fantasy, which is now
technology
elements brought into it. And you follow these two brothers, elves, the Lightfoot brothers, played by Tom Holland and Chris Pratt, who once Tom Holland's character turns 16, is given a magical staff with the spell to resurrect their long-dead father
for 24 hours.
But things go awry, to put it lightly.
The crystal breaks, the thing that powers the staff, and only the younger brother can actually use it, while the older brother cannot. Which is funny because the younger brother doesn't believe in magic, while the older brother is a firm believer of the old ways. Yes. Going as far as saying their D&D equivalent is based on history.
Yeah, there's a very strong Dungeons and Dragons inspiration and influence within this film, isn't there?
Absolutely.
You are a fan of Dungeons and Dragons.
I have been running. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons and running Dungeons and Dragons games since 2016.
Yeah,
I haven't been there since the dark days where D&D was by Satan and all that. I play mainly 5th edition, but there are some huge connotations in a comparative formula of D&D and Onward being, almost integral.
Because, I mean, Dungeons and Dragons is still fantasy, but in this, it's fantasy, but the world where those fantasy elements already exist. I mean,
They just disappeared.
Yeah, you're dealing with centaurs and fauns and cyclops and elves and pixies
Biker
and
pixies.
dragons. Biker pixies, that was an interesting one. But yeah, as we said, the spell goes awry, and they only managed to bring back half of their father, specifically the bottom half.
Well, the bottom half, I mean, heaven forbid, it should give them the top half and just be an awkward conversation for the next 24 hours.
Yeah, so it's just a pair of legs just stumbling.
And half is enough.
Yeah.
Half, and the clock starts ticking. There is urgency. There is a need to find a new crystal in order to do it. And it is an archetypal, the party has a quest, and they must go and do it.
Yes. I did notice that very early on, that it does become the kind of quest, but it's thrown into this, like I said, this urban environment. So things aren't quite how you would expect in a traditional fantasy. No, there is the more modern twist to them.
The going to the titular inn to receive the quest and how to do by the mighty quest giver, in this case a manticore, is actually just a family restaurant.
Yeah, that was a fun twist. It did remind me very strongly of Monsters, Inc., another Pixar film, because that was a world full of monsters. It bared some similarity to our own, and also it reminded me of Zootopia.
Yes.
Which was a Disney animated film populated with humanoid animals, anthropomorphic animals. And the entire city was kind of built around all these different animals and the different physicalities and all
their
that.
biomes, yeah.
And this one, there was kind of that. But maybe it was the point of it, but it kind of felt a bit more like things were more clumsily done. I mean, you have this cop character who is a centaur.
And drives.
He drives a car, but he doesn't just get into a proper centaur-made car. It's just a normal car, which he squeezes himself into as like a half horseman.
I would see that more as a joke at manufacturers with the tiny cars that they're producing now, because I find it difficult to get in and out of cars as a passenger.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think that could be it. But yeah, it definitely sort of felt like the world was more akin to ours than it was specifically built for them. And I think that was the point.
Yada yada over how quickly technology comes around, because it's meant to start with the finding of electricity somehow in the medieval ages.
Yeah, well, I guess you're dealing with magic. You've gone and got extra knowledge there, extra abilities, and if things, I mean, you look at our own world and there are other certain things holding people back, progression back.
But yet they managed to, like, this film is meant to be 90s-esque, and they're using smartphones.
Yeah, I didn't really get much of a smartphone vibe from that. Like, I mean, you got some films that put such a heavy emphasis on it.
Yeah.
And this one, I can barely remember if it was really a plot device. Maybe it's so ingrained now.
It was part of it, but it wasn't there for long.
Yeah.
It's more the evolution of the brothers, and that's where it hits home, because it's Pixar. They focus on the emotional element, going beat for beat, the heartfelt, and this is, again, Pixar through and through. Yeah, there's a few weak moments. Yeah, this is some necessary detours, like the biker pixie fight.
Yeah, that was it was interesting, but I sort of thinking, okay, this is just to have an action scene in the middle of your film because there's nothing else.
Yeah.
And there is, like, the tropes, like the third act breakup, the brothers run into conflict and they go like, how could you say this? How could you do this to me? And they part ways for a bit.
Yeah, they've gone around,
So, I mean, that's your standard thing. But, this is a great film for kids, I think.
It is. The only gripe I have with it is mainly with the casting of Chris Pratt with playing Barrie Lightfoot. And this character is clearly being written for Jack Black.
Yeah, it's a very Jack Black type thing. I did think he did well, Chris Pratt.
He did. He did well. I'm not taken away from Chris, but I'm watching him going, why do I hear Jack Black rather than hear Chris Pratt?
It's an interesting film, this, because back in the day, Pixar was like, they were the pioneers of CGI, 3D animation, and now
no one thought it would be possible. It'd be too expensive to render that, a full movie.
Yeah, but now you've gone and got Pixar, not Pixar, you've got DreamWorks, you've got
Blue Sky,
so many others which we probably couldn't even name. But DreamWorks was always known early on for, like, the pop culture side of things, for being cool and hip and
trying to do against the Disney grain.
Yeah, Pixar was very much about the emotions. I mean, Cars was sort of really the first one where it was just more, there was an emotional thing to it, but it was more just like flashy, stuff, as opposed to the heart and soul that, like,
check out what we're able to render.
I definitely got the feeling from that as well. This was like really showing off, look at how good skin is, look how good the hair is, and the water and the smoke and the dust and all that stuff. That was really like what I felt like they were showing off in this film.
Yeah.
Because Pixar is also known for, like I said, pioneering and really pushing effects and that. And this was like, yeah, see what we can do now.
This is like the next level for their style.
Oh, for sure, yeah. But, I mean, you've got so many films nowadays. I mean, like, you've got Star Wars, you've got the Avengers, which are so computer-generated imagery heavy.
Yeah, most of the sets that they have aren't even sets anymore. They're just screens.
Yeah, but now you're dealing with something which is entirely computer-generated and where things can interact with more. There was a really cool scene I liked where there's, like, a bottomless pit, a chasm, and they can cast a spell where they walk on, like, an invisible bridge if they believe in it.
Yes.
And I think that was a really cool effect, how it looks like he's basically just standing on glass above this massive hole and interacting with it like, there is a physical object there. And I thought that was really well done.
It is.
But you talked about the voice roles.
Yes.
And, I mean, like I said, you got Tom Holland, Spider-Man. You got Chris Pratt, Parks and Recreation and Jurassic World, Guardians of the Galaxy. Julia Louis-Dreyfus as their mum, from Veep and Seinfeld.
Elaine.
Yes, Elaine from Seinfeld.
I didn't realise it was her until I looked at the cast. Like, holy crap, it's Elaine from Seinfeld.
And Octavia Spencer from The Help and so many other great performances playing the Manticore.
Mm.
These big films, I guess, since their inception with Toy Story, you had Tom Hanks and Tim Allen, who were massive stars.
And John Ratzenberger is practically linked with Pixar now at this point.
Oh, he is, yeah. He's got a cameo in every Pixar film. But, that was the real draw back in the day, was to cast these big personalities, these big stars to play the characters to help flesh them out. Because with Woody, the cowboy, you've gone and got the voice of Tom Hanks there, and you've gone and got your knowledge of Tom Hanks, and he just embodies that character and fleshes him out so much within, like, the 80-minute runtime, 70-minute runtime of that film.
Yeah.
Same for Buzz Lightyear. I mean, Tim Allen was such a big personality back then. Do you think having such big guest stars in these films is really worth it? Because a lot of the times you've just gone and got stunt casting in some ways.
Like, voice acting is always being kind of fickle, because you've got cartoons, you've got anime, you've got movies, and you've got games where sometimes your star power will make and break stuff, like having Gary Oldman in a Call of Duty game playing a Russian, a terrible Russian accent at best, and then you've got DreamWorks who released Shrek, and that was really the hypex of look at these stars that we've hired for this movie.
Oh, I mean, like Mike Myers, but originally he wasn't meant Chris Farley.
Yeah,
it was originally going to be Chris Farley before he passed away. You had Eddie Murphy, Cameron Diaz, John Lithgow, big name stars from like the 90s and early 2000s comedy, who like a similar to Buzz and Woody sort of helped flesh out those characters.
They did,
and I remember the marketing material made a big deal about them being in it.
Exactly, and then follow that up with Shark Tale. The big selling point was Angelina Jolie. I think that one actually did have Jack Black.
Yes, it did.
Will
Smith.
Robert
De Niro.
That was the one I was thinking of. Robert De Niro, and that was it. The big names. When they were back doing cartoons with Road to El Dorado. Hell, even Prince of Egypt and Joseph and the Code of Dreams or whatever the hell it was called. The biggest star power in those, out of all those films, who do you remember the most?
Well, I do think about El Dorado, and that was Kenneth Branagh as one of them, but I couldn't tell you who. And it's not really...
Exactly.
Yeah.
The only big name, other than Kenneth Branagh and Road El Dorado, out of those three films, was Val Kilmer as Moses in Prince of Egypt.
Yeah, and Rosie Perez was in Road to El Dorado as well. But again, it's more about the characters than the star power.
It's about the animation, the style, how it's being done, rather than the voice names. At the moment, and this brings into the biggest argument that's being happening a lot, and I hate to say it, but Robin Williams changed voice acting
because he was the genie.
He played the genie
in Aladdin back in the day.
Because his deal was, do not make my part in this movie a bigger deal than what it is.
But he was all over the marketing material. He's all that people really know about it. I mean, the rest of the cast in that film, skilled, talented voice actors, but I could not name them off the top of my head. Unless you were a massive Disney princess geek, you could not, tell me who voiced Princess Jasmine. But it was Robin Williams, and then you kind of see the same thing with Jason Alexander to a degree. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, he was playing one of the gargoyles.
What was it? The big star power drawing for Lion King was, James L. Jones.
Oh, yeah. And Nathan Lane and Jeremy Irons and all that.
It wasn't just...
Matthew Broderick as Simba. Yeah, big deal back then.
Back then, that's when it should have been. But now, you've got so many other talented voice actors out there. Yeah, some of them get around and, they're doing cartoons, they're doing video games, they're doing anime. That's their niche. But if you focus on these guys and bring them up to the big screen, they could be as big as Tom Cruise.
Yeah,
I mean, look at Steve Bloom. Yeah, he's only got 4 voices, but the man's iconic.
He's iconic and he's dependable. I mean, he's like playing basically every character in every video game.
Nearly every video game.
10 years or so.
And,
beyond.
His most famous role back in the 90s was Spike Spiegel. Sorry, 80s. Was Spike Spiegel in the anime Cowboy Bebop.
All right.
That was his career maker. And yet, people only know him because of the smaller stuff.
It's a similar deal with the Lego movie. I remember when that was first coming out. It's Will Ferrell, it's Chris Pratt again, Elizabeth Banks, and it's like, are these characters who are really... Is that really... It worked. It worked in that case, but it was sort of like it wasn't really necessary. I don't think many people went to that going, oh, I want to see or hear Will Ferrell or Chris Pratt as the Lego man. Nowadays, it's sort of like the draw is the Lego itself. I guess they're kind of bonuses.
Well, they had that guy from It's Always Sunny playing the spaceship dude.
Yeah, Charlie Day. I remember the Lego Ninjago film, which was the first original theatrically released Lego film based upon one of their own properties.
List on that one, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have Jackie Chan, who is a guy who's not really known for his speaking ability. I mean, Jackie Chan's fantastic.
Jackie Chan is amazing.
But, you don't know him as a great orator. That's not really his deal, but he's playing...
He's there for the physical humour.
Yeah, and he does that perfectly at the beginning of the film and then in the live-action segments. But then you have the villain, Garmadon, played by Justin Theroux, who's a very versatile actor. He can do comedy, he can do drama. He was in The Girl on the Train with Emily Blunt.
Yep.
And, I mean, he has a cameo in Star Wars. And he was in The Spy Who Dumped Me with Mila Kunis and all that. With this, he throws himself so much into that role. He's basically unrecognizable, and he's really playing a character, and he does it so well. I found in that case, it's really embodiment of. It's not just like, oh, that's Will Ferrell. That's
or even folk like Will Arnett.
Oh yeah, playing Lego Batman.
And he's just throwing himself into voice acting. I'm surprised he hasn't done it earlier.
Oh yeah, he does it really well.
I mean, granted, he only gets typecast, but there's only so much you can do. Like, look at Troy Baker. Oh, look, it's Troy Baker and Nolan North as every other extra character in a goddamn game.
Pretty much, yeah.
I'm not bitter.
It sort of raises an interesting question now, because I remember a few years ago there was a video game movie, Ratchet and Clank.
Yeah.
And this is, a big popular platformer game. We went and had
Going
the original...
back from the early 2000s.
Yeah, you had the original stars from the games playing the titular roles of, like, Ratchet, Clank, Captain Quark. But then you had the villain, played by Paul Giamatti, and the sidekick, played by Sylvester Stallone. A giant robot who says, like, 2 lines of dialogue in the entire film.
Wait, they didn't get Dr. Nefarious back for that?
They did, and he was played by the original voice actor in that case, because that
you.
guy is so iconic. But the film wasn't great.
No.
It wasn't fantastic, and I can say that as someone who was watching this, like, objectively, like, I have no idea what this is. A lot of people who do, but I also watched it as a fan, or as an old-time fan who knew of it, and was watching it like, oh, okay, this isn't fantastic.
No. It's like, and this is the sort of concluded debate. Big names shouldn't be the selling point for a film.
No.
A far out there animated film that was released about a decade or so ago was done by the Games Workshop.
Yeah.
Which everyone knows, models. It's wargaming models.
Yeah.
Warhammer Fantasy, Warhammer 40,000, Lord of the Rings.
Tabletop gaming, yeah.
Tabletop gaming. They decided, we're going to pour money into an animated film. The animation was atrocious. Even for the time, it looked like something that would have been on, like a late year PS2 or, the beta testing or alpha testing for a PS3. But the voice cast, that's where all the money went, and that wasn't its selling point. You had... and he wasn't even for the whole film. He was only there for 45% of the film. The late John Hurt in this film, and they didn't make a huge deal of the cast other than, look, it is Warhammer film. You buy, you watch, yes?
I suppose that's to help draw in a more general audience by having such a massive cast, but they sort of shoot themselves in the foot there by having not very great animation, which is something which is also going to make a lot of people turn off.
But for, compared to the previous exploits of GW with their Warhammer films, with their live-action Space Marine film being so, it's still memed to today.
Not good, eh?
It's really not good.
But to wrap it up.
Onward.
Your opinions of Onward.
Fantastic film. I just have one casting gripe, and yes, it does get bogged down here and there.
I think it's sort of a return to form to Pixar. It's a fantastic, original idea, but there's so much fantastic animation out there nowadays. You've got so much to pick from. But definitely give this a watch. If you like Disney Pixar, if you like the concept of it, an urban fantasy with 2 elf brothers, definitely give it a watch.
It's going to be a genre soon, I couldn't see it.
Oh, well, it kind of is already. I mean, you've already got...
Don't talk about Bright.
Anyway, that's been the Geeks Review for today. Thank you for listening. I'm Royce.
I'm Joshua.
And we'll see you next time. Bye for now.